Okay, we got the mics loaded up here. Welcome, gents. Welcome on stage. Round of applause for them, ladies and gentlemen. The app economy, creating new categories. That's the session here. That's going to go on. Thank you.
Alan, Prashant, Richard, welcome. Each one of your companies has a fabulous founding story, as well as seen amazing growth in the last few years. Alan, you've been a serial entrepreneur. I'm curious about the story of Wattpad and what got you to start the company.
Yeah, well, perhaps let me give you a little bit of context. Wattpad is a global multi-platform entertainment company with an app that lets people discover and share stories from science fiction to romance and everything in between. And we have 80 million monthly users using the app in 50 different languages. And then we take the best stories on our platform and turn them into TV shows and movies and print books. Myself, as you mentioned, I'm a serial entrepreneur. Started the company 13 years ago, but the idea started almost 20 years ago because I love gadgets, so I love mobile devices, and I also love to read. So when I was the CTO and co-founder of my first company, in my spare time, I came up with the idea that a lot of people would be reading on mobile devices. And remember, that was year 2001, year 2002. The most popular devices at that time was the Candy Bar Nokia phone, when people could only read 2 lines of text at a time. To read a paragraph, you have to scroll 1,000,000 times before you finish. But started that prototype, and then when the flip phone came out, when people can read 10 lines of text at a time, I thought timing was right, and then I started the company.
Thank you. Prashant, you joined recently as CEO. Tell us about that experience where you joined 2 people who started the company. What was the founding story, and how has it been for you as an executive coming in to run the company?
Yeah, no, I think very privileged to be able to do this at Stack Overflow. So for those of you that don't know, Stack Overflow is the world's largest developer community and platform. So we have something like 120 million people that come to our website every month. It was started by 2 phenomenal founders, Joel Spolsky and Jeff Atwood, who realized in 2008 that it was just very important for software developers to share and be very, obviously they have an open source mindset. And back when we all were developers in our own right, we didn't really have access to a lot of shared information. So we used, textbooks and professors and so on. But they created this question and answer website, which now has 25 million questions and answers the world's questions on every single software programming language. And anybody here in the software industry uses our website. So over the 10 or 12 years since their founding, the company just very, very rapidly grew in terms of usage around the world. We have the world's developers using our platform. And now what they realize is that as the company thinks about the next 10 years of its future, it was all about how do we create a more sustainable business behind what we're doing? How do you continue to invest in the community so it's actually accessed and continues with the level of engagement that it deserves? And that's really what I'm here to do on both sides.
Thank you. Richard, your co-founder was a Buddhist monk.
Yes.
Before he and you started the company. What do you feel about coming to India and pitching meditation in India?
Yeah, thank you. It's been a really interesting part of the story. We started 10 years ago in May 2010. We started in the UK and then we moved to America in 2013. And Andy, as you said, my co-founder was a Buddhist monk, and he's got a very strong affinity with India. He spent, a good 5 years up in Dharamsala. Actually, we were up there at the beginning of this trip. I think what's been most interesting for us is, one, we fully respect that meditation has come from India, and we don't take that lightly. I think as we've spoken to people, especially young folks, they have a strong affinity with meditation, but they don't necessarily know how to practice it on a daily basis. And it's actually the opposite problem that we have in other markets. We have to convince people that meditation is a good thing to do, and then convince them that they should do it and show them the science, give them the facts. India, it's not the same. It's not the same issue. People know that it's good, but they don't necessarily know where to start because there's a lot of cultural kind of baggage around the subject. And so I think to present it in a way that's secular, that you can do anywhere on your mobile. And I think that's the reason why we've got 62 million people on our platform, 50% men and women. That's often surprising to people, and in 190 countries already. So we've got a deep, deep respect for India, and even more so having spent the last 3 weeks here.
Each one of the platforms, services, is between 50 and 100 million users in terms of the scale of people that you touch. In many ways, each one of the companies, and my company as well, Facebook, we have benefited from an open internet and just the ability to provide services and innovate on different models. I'm curious about how you've thought about getting to 1 billion users. And what about the journey from 0 to 50 or 0 to 60 million? Do you consider most important as you think about growing it from 100 million to 1 billion users? All three of you, please.
Let me start first. For us, you can view this as a double-sided marketplace for readers and writers. So in the very beginning, we don't have any content, so we couldn't attract any reader. Without any reader, no one would write on my platform. So I have the classical chicken and egg problem. So to bootstrap that, we imported almost 20,000 public domain titles from Pride and Prejudice to all the works from Charles Dickens to bootstrap the content. That allowed us to grow from 0 to maybe 1,000 users in the first year. It was very small, but that at least allowed us to get the ball rolling. And once we have the first few thousands, in year 2, we started to attract the first writer on the platform to write original content. And then it just snowballed from there. That's from 0 to 1 million. But from beyond that point, it's all about building an amazing product to get that flywheel going as fast as possible. So that's the 0 to maybe 50 million. And then afterwards, we have been thinking about turning the IPs, the content IPs, intellectual properties on our platform into other formats already. But when the timing was right, we start to take the IP off our platform and turn them into TV shows and movies. And that allows us to attract and acquire audience from a very, very different way. Even if the audience is not really on our platform. For example, many of the people are watching The Kissing Booth, one of the most watched movies on Netflix about a year ago. That came off our platform. That's perfectly okay to us. Whether it's on our platform or off our platform, I count that as our audience as well. So the growth from 0 to 50 or 50 to 1 billion users, that's the tactics and strategy to grow that drastically different at different stage of the company.
Sean?
Yeah, so I think great question. I think for us, we have, like I mentioned, on stackoverflow.com, 50 million people that show up on a monthly basis. Our Stack Exchange websites, an additional 70 million people show up there. But what I think at a high level, what we've thought about is that technology from 10 years ago was very focused on a very specific set of topics, and technology of today is converging at a very, very rapid rate. Multiple topics are coming together, like if you think about cloud technology with the advent of Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud. When you think about, obviously, full stack engineering topics, when you think about concepts like DevOps, you think about concepts like cybersecurity, all these topics are converging very rapidly. So for us, it's about not just being too siloed in one particular area, but for us to be able to really get these various facets of digital transformation to come together, and for our users to have that virtuous cycle, to be well informed about all the things they need to do their job really, really well. So So that's why, when we started, it was very quick for us to go from 500,000 questions in year one to now 25 million questions in just about 12 years. But the growth is just beginning because the advent of cloud technology, data, et cetera, is just about to explode in a very, very meaningful way, and that's where we expect it. And then last point I'll mention on this is that we expect a lot of our growth to come from countries like India, my home country, when I was born and brought up here in Bangalore. And so we see just a tremendous explosion of users in our platform in cities that you would never expect, places like Ludhiana or Mysore, et cetera, beyond obviously the metros like Bangalore and Mumbai and Delhi. So we're unlocking a lot of potential of people to come together.
Thank you, Prashant. And we'll come back to the role of India, but I'm curious, Richard, what your journey has been, 0 to 50 and beyond, how you're thinking about it.
Sure. Well, we had a bit of an unusual start in that we started off as an events company. We were putting on events in London, teaching people meditation, about 200 people at a time. And it was fascinating. I would hasten to add that this is more hindsight, looking back. But it was wonderful to get 200 people in a room to find out what did they like, what didn't they like. It was really the product development for the app. But it was a terrible business model. We made no money, and no one would give us any more money to kind of fund that business. So we were kind of forced into the app, and we launched a subscription in January 2012, and we got the Guardian newspaper in the UK to put a booklet on the front of every single newspaper. And that really did start the subscription service. And really the business, to be honest. That was the only time that we had the kind of business model where we thought, actually, there's something here. And we got to 10 million people on the platform without any paid advertising. So purely word of mouth, purely partnership driven, and quality of the product. So we didn't do any paid advertising until 2015 when we did our first round. So I think that I say all that because I think it's in our DNA to just try and make great products that people really want to use and tell other people about. I think that's still the most powerful form. And, Facebook charges us quite a lot. Thank you for that. And Google does. And so there's huge value in that, but we don't want to rely just on performance marketing to grow the brand. So when we think about, we're at 60 million people now, and when we think about getting to hundreds and hundreds of millions of people, again, like these folks we're talking about, new international markets is a big kind of area of focus for us. Going beyond meditation, we've just launched a move category. We've launched a sleep category. We've got other categories coming out. So we think about that as a kind of mindful living platform versus just a meditation app. And then we've got a big B2B business and a healthcare business. So we think about growth pretty holistically and not just on mobile. So that's kind of how we think about this next 10 years. The first 10 years was about helping people understand what we were doing. The next 10 years is about building this broader platform.
Okay. As tempted as I am to defend the Facebook model, I want to keep the focus on the three of them. Staying with you, Richard, it seems like there are a lot of meditation apps around. How do you think of distinguishing yourself? Is there a secret sauce to what you're building, or is this getting commoditized pretty quickly?
Yeah, I think so. When we started, we were the first meditation app. There's now over 4,000, I think, globally. I think that shows you that there's a huge need and that it's a real market opportunity. And a lot of people in the early days thought that the market was tiny. I think you're starting to see, if you think about the health of our mind, every single person in the world can look after their health of their mind in a more skillful way. So that means that everyone is open to potentially using this product and service. I think what we've done right from the start is really prove out that the experiences in the products that we're putting out there actually deliver results. So we have 70 clinical trials in progress at the moment. 25 have been published in peer-reviewed journals. So we can actually show that we can clinically reduce stress, anxiety, depression. So when you go into a workforce population and you speak to the HR leaders, the CFO, and you can say, actually, we can measure how much your team can reduce stress. We've actually got a client that I can't share who it is, but have actually given us 5x the revenue if we can actually prove that. So we've got upside by actually showing that we can reduce stress. They're really hard to do, those studies, all funded by other third parties, by academic institutions. And that has actually allowed us to then get into healthcare systems in the US. So we've released Headspace Health. The first product will be coming out in 2021, which is a specific product for chronic diseases. So prescribed for by your doctor, paid for by your insurer. It's really hard, long slog to do that work that I've just talked about. It's really difficult, and it takes many, many years. And we've been doing it since 2011. So one, I kind of welcome the competition because I think if there's products and services out there that people are using and it's making them healthier and happier, that's a good thing. But we feel very good about our specific strategy for long-term kind of sustainability.
Prashant, you grew up in Bangalore. A lot of the users of your platform are in Bangalore and India. Are you seeing patterns in terms of the questions that show up in India or in this region versus in the West?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the world's information on software development goes through our platform, right? So literally with that level of scale, with 150,000 new signups every month, Bangalore, by the way, is our largest user base in a single city in our platform globally. So that just tells you where the innovation is happening around the world, which is tremendous. Absolutely, to your question, India very specifically, when compared to the West, you see some very, very interesting differences. Specifically in the West, what you see with the languages that are being where questions are being asked specifically are all now focused on languages like Python, which are a lot more focused on artificial intelligence, machine learning, data-oriented capabilities. Whereas the Indian questions or the Indian users, the questions that they're looking at and answering are a lot more focused on front-end development, a lot more application centricity, a lot more B2C applications versus B2B applications. So when we think about India being sort of the factory for the West and how we want to get out of that, just that singular notion, I think there's so much to be done specifically as we think about how do we take industries like healthcare, how do we take industries like manufacturing and bring them into the new world from a digital transformation perspective by using artificial intelligence and machine learning. And that is what is the opportunity in front for all the entrepreneurs in India who are going to create the next set of disruptive companies. So it's just a very, very exciting period. And you can see it in the data that we collect literally on a monthly basis.
Alan, is storytelling global, or are you seeing strong regional or geographic association with stories and where they originate?
I think the answer is both. People are craving for local content. In the past, if you look at publishing or even TV shows or movies, very, very difficult for a smaller region, some local voices that could be heard because economically it just cannot sustain a small publisher and a regional publisher. But the internet, especially the mobile internet, completely changed that game because the mobile internet is free, is connected, is real time, it's global. The second you upload a chapter, instantly, 5,000 miles away, someone in a different country can read that story. And because storytelling is human nature, if you have that interesting storyline, story plots that can connect globally, instantly you can find an audience in many, many different countries. So, for example, a couple of years ago, the most popular story on Wattpad in India was written by a Filipino living in New Zealand. Without the internet or the mobile internet, it couldn't possibly happen. And if you look at some of the most popular Indian writers on Wattpad today, we have about just under 3 million monthly users in India. Many of them, their stories are not only resonated with Indian audience, but also people from around the world. In some cases, most of the audience is actually outside of India. So that type of opportunity is kind of unprecedented, and in a way that's the connection is the missing piece in the old analog world.
Alan, a lot of people in this room and beyond who run their own apps or thinking of starting their own companies largely think of monetization around either advertising or subscription. But you've gone beyond these two sources of revenues. It'll be interesting for you to talk about what your revenue model is and how did you discover that?
Yeah, when we start from zero, we purposely stay away from making money. It sounds very counterintuitive. If you in the analog business, if you give away your food in the restaurant, you go bankrupt in 2 days, right? But on the internet, because the distribution is free, a lot of that is free. That allow us to build a completely free service very early on, and allow us to build the user base from zero to millions first. And then afterwards, some of the interesting business models started to emerge. Of course, we have advertising too, but as the user base grew, we realized the superpower of our platform is to identify the content IPs, because the stories, the fiction, the stories on our platform, they are popular not because I like it, it's because it's loved by a million people, and I have all the data and insights to back that up. Once we figure that out, the monetization has shifted towards how can we possibly maximize the IP that we can capture. That's how we enter into the movie business, the TV show, the print book business.
Richard, at what point did you get the confidence to charge money for the service?
But as I said, yeah, we charged for the events up front. Not many people wanted to carry on paying for that. So that was the first experience. And then the subscription, when we launched in 2012, we just saw that immediately that people were put value against the product that we were putting out there. I think as we've gone into different markets and the market has kind of matured a bit, we've had to really think about pricing because, we were talking earlier, but I think there's so many subscriptions that we're getting a bit of subscription fatigue as consumers. And so how we make sure that we're continually delivering value, which is why we've been, releasing all these new verticals for the same price. But that also led us into B2B and thinking about the kind of SaaS model that we've put there. And healthcare is a completely separate kind of thought of kind of monetizing. Some of the products we're thinking about releasing could be north of $600 to $700 per person if they're paid for by the insurer. So it's just a very different kind of economic model. But we do think about it as a suite of services.
All three services are deeply rooted in social and communities in general, and yet there's a strong B2B part of it as well. I'm curious, Prashant, how do you think of that trade-off between being consumer-oriented and yet have a strong B2B orientation at the same time?
Yeah, no, great question. I think for us, because the B2C component is really because we're serving developers and technologists around the world, we very much think about, much like Alan, you said, the impact that we're driving very crisply to that audience. So an average question, we have 25 million questions. An average question by an active user is utilized by something like 65,000 users on our platform, right? Just one question. So it just gives you the amount of scale that we're able to generate. That buys us a tremendous amount of goodwill in that community because we're all there to help each other as, with the developer DNA at heart. I think that really drives the B2C conversation. But then it's all about creating a two-sided marketplace. Like, where can we actually be useful to these developers and technologists? And we think about the ecosystem of products that make sense to them. It's about how do we not only make sure that when a developer or technologist or a software developer or technologist is thinking about finding their next job, that we can actually help them. So we have a talent product that basically helps them find their next job. We have double the number of job listings on our website in India, by the way, than the US, right? So clearly that means something. Similarly, when we think about how do developers and technologists understand about the most recent technologies from big companies like the Microsofts and the Amazons or the Google, how can they learn about through advertisements that those companies post? And thirdly, how do we make sure that those developers and technologists are very efficient in their job, which is a huge, huge part of the DNA of a developer and a software developer and technologist, because they do not want to context switch. They do not want to be distracted. We talked a lot about headspace and meditation today. And so we've created something called Stack Overflow for Teams, which is a private collaboration and knowledge management repository that integrates with Slack and Microsoft Teams and other capabilities like GitHub Enterprise, so that developers and technologists are not distracted in their workflow. And companies, as a result, all the companies in the audience are able to benefit by posting jobs on our platform. They're able to post ads on our platform, and they're able to obviously help their developers stay within their companies because we're providing Stack Overflow for Teams. So it's really a two-sided B2C component and then ultimately a B2B component, because we're helping companies as well as our consumers.
Alan and Richard, last question. Both of your platforms are really built on the mobile app. Are you constrained by the mobile computing platform, and how do you think about the next generation technologies and how that will change your business?
Yeah, we are not a publishing company or movie company. We are an entertainment company. So by design, we think about what's next. People in the past few hundred years or 1,000 years, they always want to be entertained, but how they are being entertained is constantly evolving. So for us, we don't think about a specific device or a specific format. We think about the IPs, the intellectual properties, the content IP on our platform. And to answer your first question, whether mobile is restricting or liberating, absolutely liberating for us, because it's a device that you carry all the time. You can consume all the content wherever you want. And interestingly, just a fun fact, more than half our writers, they write on the mobile devices. Because when you have the inspiration, in the past, you have to rush home to type on your PC. Not anymore. You just pull out your phone and write. So
Thank you.
It's very different.
Thank you, Alan. Richard, the last 30 seconds, please.
As we think about the shift?
Yeah.
So obviously, all of our usage is on a mobile device. I think if you think about health and happiness as a kind of broad idea, and you think about meditation, you think about movement, as we think AR, we're kind of more interested in AR versus kind of VR. We think kind of the interaction between real world and the digital world is a better experience for what we're trying to produce. But you could see that our whole platform could shift pretty dramatically as those technologies become pervasive. I think at the moment, it's really about the kind of fitness and health trackers and how we can use that data to personalize our service for our members. That's probably where we're going to go first.
Alan, Prashant, Richard, thank you. A big round of applause for the three of them.